Right. Well, let's kick off. Shall we start with introductions? Anne-Marie, you're in my top left corner. Do you want to talk about who you are, what you do?
My name's Anne-Marie McCormack. I mean, I come at short film from a slightly weird way. I started in the entertainment business as a singer and an actor. And then I started, as an actor, started suggesting characters to TV shows that I was working on and kind of got myself some jobs that way. And then I moved over to the UK from Dublin in 1997. And I didn't really know anybody. I'd only started working in telly a year as a researcher type person. And then I started pitching ideas. It was always about the idea first. So I think for anybody who wants to make a short film, you've got to have a cracking idea. So I started pitching TV ideas for documentaries, and the day my son was born was the first documentary I got commissioned, which was really interesting timing. So that was for regional television, HTV, ITV West. So I built a relationship with them and then pitched a drama a year later, and I'd worked with a producer on the documentary stuff. And she also had some drama experience and was way more experienced than I was. And she sort of bolstered up my application, I suppose, by virtue that they knew that I'd be in a safe hands. And I'd never written a script before. So I entered a competition for new writer-directors. So that's a good way of approaching things, enter competitions. And the first year I didn't get through, but I did ask for some feedback from the commissioning editor. And I co-wrote that script with somebody. And she said, it didn't quite work, but the bits that I liked were these kind of scenes. And they were the scenes I'd actually written. And I went, oh, maybe I can write myself, on my own. And I sort of ran an acting school before that. And I used to make up stories for short films because, I'd get my people who were involved in, in the acting class. I would create characters around them and create a scenario and a location before I was ever a trained filmmaker. So I never really trained as a filmmaker. I just had a video camera, had some people, made up a story and got them all to act. And it kind of evolved through that way. So I come at it from quite an unusual perspective. So anyway, then the next year I entered that same competition and I was shortlisted. And I remember the person saying to me who was on the panel, so where did you write, where did you train as a screenwriter? And I said, I didn't understand what he meant. I said, no, well, I haven't. And he said, well, you know how to write scripts. So I thought, oh, I know how to write scripts. So it kind of happened that way. And I got that commission and I wrote and directed it because I directed a documentary or a couple of documentaries before. And I managed to get an Oscar-winning actress to play the lead. And again, it was kind of weird because it was Brenda Fricker who was in My Left Foot, and she had worked in Casualty in Bristol, so she liked the idea of coming to Bristol. She liked the fact I was a female writer-director, had to meet her in Dublin. She liked the script. Her agents had to read the script first, and it was kind of a combination between liking the script, wanting to meet a new female writer-director, and being in Bristol. So it's weird how these things happen. And that, and then my kids were young and I started to write for Doctors, for the BBC series Doctors. And then I had a kind of real desire to get back into the directing side. So I started making my own short films, writing, directing, producing, doing the catering, doing the makeup, the costumes, the locations, the whole works. My husband's a cameraman, so that helps. Yeah. And taught myself to edit because I couldn't afford an editor. So I did everything on the super cheap, as in no money, except my own money. And then last year I was funded as a producer to do a BFI short. So it was a way of just getting out there again and doing your thing. And I suppose you have to prove yourself to a certain extent. So that's just roundabout journey of how I ended up making short films.
Can I interrupt? When you say on no money, and you say your own money, do you really mean on no money, or did
I
you
really mean.
But how can you make a film on absolutely no money?
Having a husband who can shoot stuff helps.
Okay.
Having friends who are sound recorders or whatever. And the very first thing I made was in my own house, and it's a really interesting location. And I came up with this short film idea, which was 15 minutes long, about a family online. And I'm not going to tell you too much about the story, but basically a student comes into their house who the dad has been watching online, let's put it that way, and it shakes the whole family up. Okay, so it's a kind of comedy drama, which is a genre I really like. So I made the first 15 minutes literally over one weekend, but I wrote, I had a good script, probably 7 to 9 drafts of that script before I attempted to make it. And it was a brilliant experience. We had such a laugh doing that film. And then we decided to make another 15 minutes. So now I have a half-hour pilot of that. And then after that, I've made about another 4 or 5 films. One was partly funded by Bath Spa University, where I teach filmmaking and script writing. So that was funded. It wasn't one I'd written myself, but I produced it and directed it. And then in lockdown, I got my whole family involved in a 90-second drama, which they weren't pleased about. And it was basically, my husband had gone out into the woods and shot these amazing drone shots. And that inspired a film for me about a woman going in the woods. So I acted in it and I edited it and did the sound, and my sons were in it and they weren't happy, but they did it. Talk about, so sometimes you just do stuff. And then obviously last year, having been funded by BFI, you get a budget, which you go, wow, we've got a budget. Now it's great, but you have to work for that budget, as in you work really, really hard, because obviously there are things you have to attend to from the BFI's point of view. It's lottery funded and there's a lot of documentation. In some ways, it was so much easier to make my own film with no budget. Now when I say no budget, I might have put about £1,000 of my own money into it. But that's because I've done lots of the jobs as well. And then one film, I put another £800 into my festival strategy to get it into festivals and to pay for the cost of putting it into festivals, which I know we will be talking about later. That's a whole other thing. So I think when you do get a proper budget, you do have to pay everybody on your set. So that has to be attended to. So in a way, you have to do it by the book then. And it's a very different experience. It's equally worthwhile, but in a very different way. And obviously you've got the name of a funding body you've been through a screening process. And that actually, in a way, is really, really important, because it's validation for the work that you've probably done a lot of already. So now you're seen as someone who's worth funding. And it's really about the team that come together. And again, it's the idea of the initial idea plus the team, which I absolutely appreciate, as if you're just into screenwriting and that's all you want to do, it's very difficult to marry yourself up with the team, especially a producer. And a lot of these funds require you to have a producer on board, which is basically asking you to, it shows a validation on your part that you've managed to secure a producer.
Did you apply as a producer? Sorry, tell me to shut up, Steve.
No.
I will shortly. One of those questions for the end.
In our case, for the BFI short, we applied as a team of 3 women. So there's a lot of diversity guidelines you have to attend to as well. We happen to be 3 women. I met a woman at a BFI event, and she pitched me this idea over coffee. And she just said, oh, I'm working on this. I've never made a short film. But she was a BBC director for Country File. So she had her directing hat on already. I had writing and directing and producing. So she needed a producer. And I liked the idea, and it was a comedy drama, and it's called Hats. And then she said she also had a young producer who she'd like to work with. So I ended up doing really the script editing and co-producing with the younger producer. So in a way, the combination of my screenwriting help and, you know, obviously Michelle's directing, even though she hadn't done drama before, and Uella had done some short film. She'd done a short film before, one or two. So it was a combination of us all having interconnected skills that we could all help each other in different ways. And that was, and I think the team were very diverse, as in 2 Black women and 1 Irish woman. So in a way, I think that might have helped, in the sense it was a Black story and it was a female story. So I think there was a lot of boxes were ticked in terms of that application that made it strong. So yeah, there you go.
Exciting. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn my microphone off. I promise.
Well, I would say that you need a lead producer in the BFI case. And I didn't go in as the lead producer. Uella went in as the lead producer. But in our application, we described what else we were all bringing to the table. So, and I like to support new talent as well. And that was really helpful. But I think, you know, the combination of our intergenera, you know, the fact we were older and younger was quite helpful as well.
I have applied for these things as just the writer, and I do feel like there are parts of the form I'm not filling in. It would be better if there was more of me, more skills to an application. I do.
Well, there are different schemes. Like some of them are for pure writers, and you don't have to have a producer on board. And it's for a, you know, to get a treatment, like you apply for a feature film, and to make it pitch ready, basically.
Yeah, it's the early development fund, isn't it, that they run for writers, mainly for features.
Yeah.
But it is a painful process. Anything to do with BFI funding, it's not easy. It takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication. How long did you find the process, Anne-Marie? How long did it take you to kind of get from start to funding?
Can you actually believe this? But it probably took us from the first meeting, probably about 2 years, because when we put the actual application in, very kindly, Alice Cabanas, who is now, you know, head of sort of BFI network, she was the talent manager in Southwest. She said, I think it's really strong. I really like this idea, but it isn't quite ready. So she put us through a development process, and she helped Michelle. There was some development for being a director, working with actors. Uella went on the COVID, you know, coronavirus, because it was in the middle of lockdown. So different training was that we also had a script editor come and look at the script. So I think the script wasn't ready. And then we sort of reapplied, and that was only allowed because we were told we were going through this little development process. So that took, I don't know, about 9 months, I think, in total. And then we put it in when it was stronger. And that was very, very helpful. And then obviously it got commissioned. But from the time we actually met each other to the finishing of the film was 2.5 years or something. Very, very long time, huge amount of dedication. And I agree with you, it's an incredibly long process, even applying for these things. So I think read the diversity guidelines, make sure you hit all those boxes, because that is really important in your application, and team up and get yourselves out there. And BFI do offer some great networking events to try and marry up writers with directors and producers if you are purely a writer.
Yeah, they are really good, and they want to support filmmakers, I find, and support writers. And for those who don't know who our Southeast reps are, our talent executives are Tom Whiteman, and Nicole Davis has just started as well as one of their talent execs. And they sit within the Film Hub Southeast, so you can find them. It's always a bit weird, but if you go through the Independent Cinema office and Google Tom Whiteman, you'll find him. You'll get an email address, and then you can ask him questions about the fund.
Do you pitch to them, or you just get the information about the film, the forms, and then you complete them?
So I've not applied for the funding myself, but I do know that there is a process. So I think you have to put in your application. Is that right, Anne-Marie? And then they'll look at it and they'll make contact if they feel it's strong enough.
Yeah, I mean, we heard on the year that we got through, which was a year ago, or the year before maybe, but we made it last year. 650 people applied approximately across the UK, and 15 films were chosen to get made. So that's how competitive it is. I would say it's not a starter scheme at all, truthfully, even though it says it's emerging talent, fair enough. But you really do need a bit of a track record in that there's a lot to do. And I'm so glad I co-produced it with someone, because we each took different bits to help each other. And Uella was across, she started the budget, and she did a lot of the BFI paperwork. I got locations, casting, was involved in, the organization of the logistics of the shoot and how that would pan out. So in a way, I took a lead on that side of it, and Uella took a lead on all the background stuff that needed to be done. There was Albert, this thing which is about, how ecological your shoot is, which is, again, lots of gathering of information. There was crossover. There were times, like one of the locations Uella dealt with, there's risk assessments, all sorts of things. But I was quite clever in finding a location that I work in, which was Bath University. And I secured 9 locations in that one location. So we shot over 2 days in one location, which meant it was really easy to move around. It's a big campus, but we had a courtroom, we had offices, we had exteriors like a TV station. We had everything that looked like something different, because it has old buildings, new buildings. So I think that's something, if you're making stuff yourselves, and this is what I've always done, I've always secured one location that can answer many, many locations, because it saves you money, saves you time. And also, if it's a multivarious, that's the word I would use, a multivarious location that ticks many boxes for you. The more you move for your shoot, the more it's going to cost you money and time. And they are the two things in a short film that you don't really have much of. So that would be a big tip, I would suggest.
And sometimes the longer you make your short film, it's going to cost more, really, isn't it? But the more complex it becomes, the more costly it's going to get.
For sure. And the bigger the cast, all those things.
Absolutely.
Craig, you've programmed short films, so you've seen a lot of short films.
That's right. So I'll just give you a little bit of a quick potted history. So I dipped my toe in the world of short films about 10 years ago. Started just as a short screener with the Norwich Film Festival, watching shorts. And then in 2015, I had the opportunity to become a co-director of it, and took it from what was quite a small hobby to a small charity, then a registered charity. And I got it qualifying with BAFTA and BIFA. So that meant all the short films that were British, that got through, had an opportunity to be considered for those awards as well. And I spent probably about 4 years programming shorts. And in about 2020, I set up a company called, or co-founded a company called Norfolk Screen, which was all about trying to promote Norfolk for filming. So I kind of stepped away from programming. So for anyone who's in the East and or within Norfolk and wants to check out Norfolk Screen, it's a little plug, give it a whirl. We're looking for people to sign up, and it's always good to know what talent's in the region. But I still keep myself very much in the short film world. I still watch shorts for Norwich Film Festival. And earlier this year, I had an opportunity to be on the short screening team for the Tribeca Film Festival, which was pretty cool. So yeah, so it's nice to see quite an array of short films and help to select the ones that get through.
So what makes a good short film for you? Which ones stand out?
Ooh, well, I think one of the things to consider when you are making a short, and I'm just thinking in terms of programming, is the length of a film, if I'm honest with you. I'm going to start with that because I think it's really important. So festivals generally will probably look at doing, say, a 90-minute segment for a short screening. And if you're a festival who gets, say, 13, 14, 1,500 shorts a year, it's a lot of films to go through, and you want to be able to program the best amount of films that you can. So if your film is, say, 40 minutes, it has to be probably one of the best 40-minute films you're ever going to see in your life, if I'm honest with you, because within that time frame, you could screen, I don't know, 3 12-minute films, 13-minute films within that, which are really good. So I always say to short filmmakers, think about the length of the film, because it is really, really important, and also to check out if you're thinking about what films you want to submit to festivals, check out what their criteria is in terms of the length of films that they'll accept. So Norwich is up to 25 minutes. Tribeca was up to 35 minutes, I think it was. They usually, I would say, up to about 25, 35 minutes from my experience, but I would definitely check out the guidelines of what you're looking at in terms of average length. I think also in terms of what makes a good film, for me, I like things that aren't too complex. I want something that's going to engage me as a viewer, because it has to engage your audience. And I think that is really, really important to think about what that feels like for the audience who are watching it. Because I can imagine, you know, you're writing this thing, you want to get it produced, you want to get it directed, you want to get it out there to the audience. But it was really interesting what Anne-Marie was saying about kind of festival strategies as well, and the cost associated with that, because when you are submitting to festivals, it can get really, really expensive. They range from, you know, £5, £20, £50, £100. You know, they are really extreme depending when you want to submit a film. So yeah, so things that aren't too complicated, quite simple. I really like the idea what Anne-Marie was saying about using the one location as well. I think that's very clever and good for saving some money. I also like films that don't try to put in about 5 or 6 different types of genres, because we see that quite a lot, that people will just try and overcomplicate it by putting lots of different genres in there. So if you can, stick to one. And also just trying to make your film quite unique if you can as well. I think that's really important. We have a lot of films that get submitted, and you get a lot of trends, I find, with films that get submitted. So my experience is you get a lot of films that are dealing with either death, loss, COVID. And again, when you've got 1,400 short films and you've got a massive chunk that are just dealing with that, you want to be able to select the best ones out of that, but it's going to be a lot harder because you've got more of the same kind of themes. And again, when you're thinking about your audience, you don't want to program a 90-minute section all about COVID, for instance, because you want your audience to, you know, engage with that and come back. Yeah. We want repeat audiences.
Yes, I'll just make them not want to leave the house again.
Exactly. We don't want to really relive the last 2 years. But yeah, so just kind of thinking about what is a unique concept is really important, I would say. And like I say, try and keep it as short as you can, but as punchy as you can, and engage that audience.
And for the Norwich Festival and Tribeca, what kind of proportion are funded and which ones are made with their husband and their family in their house?
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting because one of the things, in terms of those who, you know, you've made your film and then you want to submit it to festivals, one of the platforms that is used, I would say predominantly now, is a platform called Freeway. It's a really easy process just to upload your film, and you can send it to, they've got like 5,500 festivals, maybe even more now, listed on that site. So you can just upload it and tick the festival you want to go to. And within that, you can see what kind of budgets people spend, because they will tell you. And I've seen budgets from, like, I remember seeing one animated short that was 24 minutes long, and that was $1.5 million. Serious money. It did have kind of doing the voiceover, and it was clearly a concept for something else, but it was very high quality to films that have cost a couple of quid, you know, and people have used their iPhones, and it is very varying. We have a 1-minute movie competition as part of the festival, and I always think that's a really nice place to start, because it doesn't cost you a lot to submit, it doesn't cost a lot to create a 60-second film, but it's really hard to fully know how many of those films have gone on and got said, like BFI funding. Sometimes they'll talk about it and you can see it as part of their synopsis if they've got it, but I couldn't fully say how many have got there. But the variations in terms of what people spend on films, you know, it's staggering. I always find the Americans spend a lot more than the British, if I'm honest with you, in terms of short films. But yeah, it can be really staggering.
I believe, just picking up on that, Craig, I believe in America, they don't have short film funding bodies. So you really have to go out and crowdfund or fund it yourself. So, you know, occasionally you get a short film that is a sort of proof of concept for a bigger, longer feature, and they just make one section. But picking up on what you were saying earlier, Craig, and I think it's a really, really important point, your length, your film, your story has to earn the length it is. Okay, and that is super, super important. If you're going for a 15-minute short, it needs more depth, it needs more twists and turns, it needs, or certainly a 30-minute. I always thought that, you know, the cutoff really for a short film is about 30 minutes, as Craig was saying. But generally, most are anything from a minute and a half to 10 to 15. But even with the one we just made, I was very keen to keep it to 10 minutes because some film festivals want you to do no more than 10 minutes. Like Bath Film, you have to put in the length under 10 minutes. But if you're going 15 minutes, Danny DeVito basically made a short film called Curmudgeons. I don't know whether anybody has seen it. It's a
Fantastic. It's honestly, Google it, everyone. Go watch it on YouTube. Yeah. It is absolutely just a stunner of a short film.
And it's 15 minutes. Curmudgeons, it's called, okay? And it's two old guys in a care home. That's all I'm going to say. And it's, you know, it's comedy. And this is picking up on what you were saying, Craig, as well. Comedy, you know, if you're getting a lot of serious stuff, and then you suddenly get a Curmudgeons. Now, obviously, that was he funded it probably himself. His granddaughter's in the film. You know, there's lots of Rellies in there. You can tell because you look at the credits. DeVito. But I think that earns the 15-minute length. There is something very deep about that film. Okay, it's not like a 10-minuter has some depth, but it's not a one gag film. A 10-minuter. A 5-minuter might just be a one gag film. Usually it's what's going to hook you in and what are you going to leave your audience, back to what Craig was saying is really important. What are you going to leave your audience feeling at the end? And the other thing is the authenticity is super important. Like, why do you want to make that film? And I say this to my students all the time, but just to give you an example, one of the films I made, and I might send you the link through this chat, is called Hot in Here, and it's set in a sauna. I do saunas every night of my life because I'm part of a gym and I go swimming outside and I get in the sauna before I go outside and then I get in the sauna after. So saunas are a thing in my life, okay? And I remember lying down in the sauna going, God, I wonder if someone died in the sauna. What would happen if they were there on their own? Okay, so that was the seed of the idea. So that was my imagination going off, flitting away. Then I was working with this young actor and we'd made this other pilot together and I loved working with him. He was great fun. And I just was chatting to him about this and he was brokenhearted. He'd just broken up with his girlfriend. He was on Tinder. He couldn't find anyone. So he wanted to make something about not, you know, losing love and not finding love. And he said he had swiped someone on Tinder, and the very next day he was in a train station getting a train and he saw the girl that he had swiped, as in yes. And I said, oh, did you go up and talk to her? And he went, oh, no, she hadn't liked me back, so I didn't. And that was the clincher for me. I went, okay, so this online world versus meeting someone in the flesh in a sauna. So there you go. I'll send you the link now and you can watch that film at your own leisure. And it's a comedy drama, but it has a beginning, a middle and an end, and it's heartwarming. So it was one thing and that was the other. The tone of that film, I wanted it to be funny, but I wanted you to come away going, isn't that just lovely? And hopefully the film fulfills that. So, talking about festival strategy, that's the only film I actually paid to get a festival strategy. What I mean by that is there's a company called Festival Formula. They're very, very good, run by a lady called Katie McCulloch and her... Ian, okay. Fantastic, they're super organized. And what they did is she watched the film and she said to me, it's not top tier festival material, which was good advice, it's second tier. So she said, if I was doing a strategy for you, I would suggest these kind of festivals. So I decided to pay for a 6-month strategy, which basically she curates it for you and she gives you the list of all the festivals she thinks you should enter. And she said, what's your budget? And this is the budget you might need. So it's like a spreadsheet, and you just enter the festivals through Film Freeway.
Yeah, they are brilliant. I would just kind of add to that. I mean, I know Katie and Ian quite well, and they are fantastic. They know their festivals. They absolutely get short films. They get the work of short filmmakers, and they know what your film would pair quite well with the festival. Has got the best chance of getting through. So I cannot praise them enough. They're stars, absolutely stars. And it was really interesting. I was thinking more about kind of short films that I've seen. I would say about 90% of films that get submitted to festivals are dramas, if I'm honest with you. It must be something about that figure. So when you do get a comedy through, or a comedy drama, it's really lovely, because you want to be, when you've watched, I don't know, 15 depressing short films, you kind of you enjoy a bit of lightheartedness, you want to laugh. Or when you get a good sci-fi through, or a good horror, sometimes it just really kind of gives you a different perspective and something else to enjoy. So yeah, it's nice to have a bit of variety, I would say.
I would say that as a sidebar, I just want to chuck in that in the Writers Guild Awards every year, there is a online short comedy category, which a friend of mine, I think, won a couple of years ago with something that he shot on his phone, very much on the hoof. So there are opportunities out there for comedy.
Yeah, but I just want to say, I do also love a drama, and one of the films that I would really recommend checking out if you've not seen it yet, it won the Oscar. It was The Long Goodbye by Razamid. I don't know if anyone's seen it yet. It's 12 minutes and it is incredibly powerful. Really good 3-act structure. It starts off Asian family in their home, all looks absolutely fine. Then you see on the TV that there's some white supremacists who are going around knocking on people's door, and it just takes a really ugly turn, but it is super powerful, and they do that in 12 minutes. And I think it's probably one of the most powerful films I've watched in the last year. So I definitely, it will blow your mind about what can be done with such a short space of time.
Anne-Marie, so festival, you talked about a festival budget. There obviously this company that advises you on a festival strategy sounds really useful. After that, is the festival budget mostly about just the entrance fees? Yeah,
definitely. Okay. I did get into international film festivals as a result of that strategy, but not loads of them. But at the same, and they weren't all BAFTA. This is another thing I discovered after the event, that it's quite useful to have ones that are recognized by BAFTA, or you know more about that, Craig. But those recognizable festivals, like I got into sort of humorous type ones in America and Australia. I, funny enough, didn't get into any in the UK, which maybe it's my sense of humor or something, didn't get through. But I thought it was quite interesting that it was Australia, America and Ireland were the places I got my film into, and not the UK. So comedy doesn't always travel, funny enough, that's well known. So yes, investing in, even with the BFI, with the money that you get, we carved part of our budget for entering film festivals. It is important to have the money there, because as Craig was saying, they can vary. I think the cheapest is about £10 that I've ever, and you try and get the early bird ones.
I was going to say that early bird special is the way to go if you can, because it will save you a fortune. I mean, some they go from early bird all the way to late extended fees, and they can start from £10 all the way through to £75 for just a short film, and that is a lot of money to be spending if you're submitting to, I don't know, say you choose 10 festivals. Before you know it, you could have spent £500, £600, £700, and there's never any guarantee that you're going to get through. So again, having a really good strategy, knowing what your budget is and keeping to your budget is really important. Because I don't recommend going bankrupt for your short film. Try and have a sensible budget and kind of hope for the best, really. But again, those festival strategists are really good. Like say, Katie and Ian from Festival Formula. There's another one called the Festival Doctor, Rebecca, who runs that. Again, is very knowledgeable. So kind of Google and see what's out there. There's also, I was going to say, there's also a lot of festivals that are a bit dodgy as well that I think's worth being aware of. There are some festivals that maybe don't have the credibility, and I think when you're submitting a film, it's nice if you can get through to, say, a BAFTA qualifying festival, because it does give you that extra credibility or that extra stamp of approval, which might just then help if you're looking for funding for your next project. And again, I think one of the things that might be useful for people in this room to think about, I know we've spoken about the different types of shorts that we get through at festivals, but a lot of festivals are always looking for people to be short screeners, like I know the Norwich Film Festival do, for instance. And it's a really great way to see what type of films are being submitted to festivals, is by having that opportunity to say, do you know what, I'll watch 15, 20, 30, 40 shorts just to get a real sense of the quality that are coming through, and just to see how you would kind of score it as well. Because one of the things that going through Film Freeway gets you to do is to think about a film, not just on the writing, but you know, just thinking about the way that it's been directed, the way that it's been edited, the production design, for instance, the performances. So it's a really useful process and a really good learning process for anyone, I would say. So yeah, check out different festivals to see if they offer that. But if you've got an opportunity to be a short screener in some capacity, it's never a waste of time. It's really useful, and I think can aid practice.
Yeah, and I would say if you can act yourself, especially the comedy thing, that can be really helpful, because you know they often look for, as Claire was saying, they often look for people who are comedians or stand up, you know, people who do live or whatever, open mic nights and that kind of thing. There are opportunities for that, and a lot of comedians are great writers because they do write their own material. So that is one route you can take, or get to know actors and get to know locations that you could use. Do it on the cheap if you can. I would say try not to invest a huge amount of money, because it's not only an investment of money, it's an investment of your time, a lot of your time. We kept our crews down to 5 people, which is ridiculous. But at the same time, if you've got 5 multi-talented people, you know, who can do several jobs, like one of my actors was very good at graphic design, so he designed the titles and the end credits and stuff, you know. So you get, and partly because I work in a university, I have some contacts that way. Sometimes I've worked with great students or past students, and I've asked them to come on board and work with me, and you know, develop really good working relationships with those people. So people of different generations who might want to work together because they need the experience, and you need people to help you, and they like your project. But I would also say, if you are going to make your own stuff, make sure you have a lot of fun doing it, you know, and you feed people really, really well. So if you can't cook, make sure someone can cook for you. I put most of my budget into feeding people, you know, making people feel happy on the shoot. Because if you're going to spend, you know, sometimes you might be working till midnight with people, you know, from 8 in the morning, and you want to make sure they're well fed and well looked after and not outside freezing themselves. I was going to say something else, but I won't. You know what I was going to say. So yeah, there are the other tips I would say. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, it's useful to kind of ask us stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just mentioned at this point, drama schools and film schools are often looking for short film scripts. So that's a great way to get your film made in some form without it costing you, I guess.
That's a brilliant idea, actually. And we often have, although my filmmaking students, they often write their own scripts, or they collaborate with people. Sometimes they cross collaborate with writing students. Or the other thing is, you know, come up with ideas that are current, and you're picking things up in the wind from the news or whatever, but collaborating with a university and students, drama students or writing students, filmmaking students, MA students, because they usually work in the summer, whereas the other students are working from sort of October right through to May. So campuses can be available for shooting in the summertime if they're not, you know, having courses coming on their campus during the summer. So that's how we managed to make our short in the summer. Now, luckily, it was lockdown. If it wasn't, a lot of Chinese students come over to do short courses during the summer, so we might not have been able to secure that location. So think about securing locations that you have contacts with. You know, when I said that sauna film, I go to that gym and I knew the lifeguard had been to film school. So I chatted to him lots about film school, and we had made a connection. And I knew the manager quite well because I was always talking to people in the, I'm nice to the people who work there. So therefore, when I requested getting a film made there, I had to film through the night from 10 in the evening till 8 in the morning. The cleaners were coming in at 6:30 or something. So we were told we had to get out by that time. But we had to schedule the film to go right through the night. And the fact I knew the lifeguard had been a film student and loved film, he stayed up all night for us. And I paid him to stay up all night. I said, what would David Lloyd pay? Ooh, I shouldn't have mentioned, but other gyms are available. But actually, I basically asked him what he would have been paid if he'd worked, and I gave him that money. And he was
fed him.
And fed him. Really good food. Yeah, so there you go. Top tips from someone who's done it for absolutely nothing. But when you do lots of stuff with no budget, when you do get a budget, myself and Nuella, I mean, our director would laugh at us and go, oh, I know you're going to say no about this. We kept within our budget. We were very adamant to keep within our budget because you're giving us this money. It's our duty as producers to do that. So having done stuff for nothing a lot, I had ways of thinking outside of the box of how can I do this without, exploiting people, because obviously you can't do that either. So yeah, be mindful.
Yeah, I was also just going to say there are periodically throughout the year, there are different funds that do become available through different companies to access funding. Again, usually they want a producer and a director involved, but there are companies out there like First Flight Film. They offer a short film fund. There's the Film Fund grant. I can pop some of these in the chat afterwards. Yeah, Genera Films, you have to pay a very small application fee, but you can get up to £5,000 worth of funding from those guys. I'm trying to think who else has got some cash out there. There's something called the Uncertain Kingdom as well, which do have a short film fund every year. But it's just about kind of tying it in at the right time, finding out what that looks like and when it's going to be released. And I know they are quite competitive. Some of the places that do ask, same with BFI, it's quite a competitive market. But it's just worth being aware of kind of what is available out there. And I have got a useful document. I'll just pop it in the chat afterwards for you guys to have a look at.
Yeah, because some of these come up through come in through the Guild newsletter and BBC Writers Room. Is there a kind of resource? Is there a place where all of these? Is there a short film? What's a great place to find out about all of these things? Apart from the document you're going to give us any minute.
Of course. For me, I just find them out through Googling, like literally short film funds, and then it'll just give me a bit of a list. But some places it can be really tricky to find, if I'm honest with you, because of when they come out throughout different parts of the year. But then other things like sometimes streamers I've noticed recently, or Sky or Amazon, they'll or Netflix, for instance, they might release certain films, short film funds as well. So it's just about keeping an eye out on really useful. I don't know how many people use kind of like Twitter or Facebook, but just keep an eye on BFI. Again, follow Norfolk Screen. I do a lot of retweeting when I see short film funds come up, or other festivals. Sometimes they'll retweet kind of if there's projects and funds coming out there.
They for writing the script or for making the film?
Usually it's for the filmmaking part of it.
The filmmaking, so the script, you do the script and then.
Yeah, most of it, and like I said, most of the time they want a producer and a director attached. But don't get me wrong, there will be, I'm sure there are short film funds out there for writers. And in fact, I'm sure Screencraft probably have something, or there must be some pitch funds out there as well. But it really is, Google's your best friend sometimes. And speaking with other people and I think that's one of the joys of festivals, is the networking part. So if you can meet up with other filmmakers and find out how they generated some money maybe to get their film made, it's about learning from one another. It really is. And yeah, never knock the crowdfunding aspect as well.
Yeah, I think that again, maybe working with younger people as well, who if you're dipping your toe in it and you have never done that, crowdfunding might seem like a very daunting thing. And it's also, for me, it's like, oh, do I really want to ask people for money to help with my short film? There is that element to it. But certainly the students that I've worked with, they're very happy to do that. And there's a bit of upkeep involved in that as well. The IMDb Script to Screen Award is one that I could recommend, which comes through Bill, again, Bath Film, Cole Needham, who set up IMDb, is always on the panel. And, or, you know, one of the short films I actually made that I didn't write had come second in the IMDb Script to Screen Award, the script, and my university offered to part fund that. So I made that film, and then that writer went on to win the award a year later or 2 years later. The good thing about entering that, even if you don't get through, you can pay a little bit extra. It's not that expensive to get your script read by a professional, and they will give you feedback. And I think that's quite useful. So in the absence of being part of a group, you know, a writers group, where you can feedback to each other, it's also good to get a professional reader to feedback. And the same with the BBC Writers Room. They will, you know, they accept 10,000 scripts. There's about 10,000 scripts a year they get through their door. But they read the stuff and they will give you feedback. So I would say, having taught screenwriting as well as being a screenwriter, one of the things we do a lot of is workshopping groups, and they work in little small tables, like a table read situation, and give each other constructive feedback. So if you've got 2 or 3 people saying the same thing, oh, I didn't quite understand that, or what does that refer to? If they're confused by anything and you don't take that note on board, you're missing a massive trick. And if you're doing comedy stuff and they're laughing, then you know you're onto something good. Or if it's a very moving thing and you can feel them being moved, that's really helpful, you know. So getting feedback and not being precious about your feedback.
Yeah.
I love it, you know, and if you ever become a professional writer, that's part of the game. You're always going to get feedback, either from script editors, from producers, from series producers, from directors, from producers. You'll always get feedback. And if you're not, if you keep defending your ideas and go, oh, well, I did this because of you, sometimes it's just good to sit back and listen and go and take notes and then just absorb and then go, ooh. And some of the best feedback I've ever got was not very specific about dialogue or something. It's just like a note, like, get domestic in this scene, was one of the best notes I ever got. And I changed the scene from a mother and daughter fighting with each other to the mother doing the washing up while the daughter's trying to talk to her and the mother ignoring her. And that was one of the best pieces of advice I got. So sometimes, you know, just someone will give you a nugget that'll be a springboard into making it better. Yeah, that's, and the other thing I was going to say about the locations thing as well, making sure you open up a world that people don't know, like Claire was talking about, an opticians. I haven't seen a drama set in an opticians before. And that's interesting. That's a story world. So think about your story world. Where is it set? Why is it set there? What's specific about that place or that job or that landscape that is unique? You know, I don't know whether any of you have ever watched, it's not a short film, but Force Majeure is set in a ski resort. It's a brilliant film. And it's a near avalanche situation that spirals this couple into a massive, it's on Netflix, brilliant film. But the landscape is an alpine landscape, but there's also saunas and, you know, obviously I'm obsessed with saunas, so I'm into it. So think about your story world. That's important. Yeah. I can't think, I know that there was a few other things spiraling into my brain and I'm forgotten them now, but I'm sure when Craig and the rest of you or anybody else asks questions,
sure,
I'll think of it again.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions they want to check in at this point about filmmaking or saunas or there is always, just if it's any comfort, there's always an awkward point or pause at this point.
I've got 2 questions, Steve.
Okay,
one is, well, one is to Craig. with voiceover, do you think a voiceover, do you see hundreds and hundreds of films that are a voiceover and they put you off?
I don't actually see, there's not hundreds with voiceovers, and I don't mind a voiceover.
You don't mind a voiceover.
It's all about what's in that story. If it's going to, yeah, if it's going to engage and it's going to be entertaining and it's something not too complicated that just makes the audience go, what's going on? Then yeah, I have no problems with voiceover.
And my other question is, whereas if you do a radio piece, sometimes that can lead on to a film if it's really great, it's well received. Is it worth sort of recording something as a podcast in order to get funding for a short film, or is that just too much hassle? You just, because it's so, the sums involved are small, as Marie said, you can make it so cheaply, you don't really need to go through all that, or is that an idea or not?
I mean, I'm not really sure. What do you think, Anne-Marie, from your experience?
I would say, the only thing about radio or podcasts, they generally are a lot of dialogue. So to make that translate, you have to have a lot of visuals attached to what you're doing.
Yeah.
I just watched that film, Good Luck to You, Leo
Grande.
Oh yes, that was filmed in Norwich. A good friend of mine.
Fantastic film. Loved it. Mostly dialogue. Very unusual for a film. You could have just taken one of those scenes and made a short film out of it. They were like little vignettes. They were quite unusual. But the story world was a hotel room, if you remember, with two amazing characters and amazingly sharp dialogue. So if your thing is brilliant dialogue, there's no reason why not. You couldn't do a podcast version. I have done a podcast series, and it's factual. Again, there's loads of work attached to that. I'm not, I sound like I'm really shy of work. I'm not, but I go in, like Claire was saying, sometimes you're so naive, you go, woohoo, I'm going to do this thing. And then you realize you get involved in it. And then you go, oh, right. When you've no budget, you're just, again, it takes a lot of effort and time, and it's always the editing that takes the time. So the making is the easy bit, in my opinion. The writing is the difficult bit. Then the making, once it's all set up, the prep is all very complex and logistical, and that's very hard work. The making, hopefully, is the pleasure bit, where it all works and it all goes according to plan. You have a great time and you can let it all go and go with it. Editing takes ages, and also getting it out there. So the strategy bit, I find that tiresome. The marketing bit, I want someone else to do that. That's like too many jobs. I'm going, oh, please, someone who loves that bit, you do that bit. You can't do everything yourself, So I would say with a podcast, if it's got a brilliant story world, that is a visual story world as well as great dialogue. Why not?
I was just thinking, like, if you're applying to something like BFI, it might give it some substance. I didn't know if it would detract or whether.
I would say just put your effort into the application and the strength of the material you supply, which is you're asked for a synopsis of your story, a log line, one line. You're asked for a longer synopsis. They give you a word count. You have to keep within that word count. The diversity angle, how diverse is it? What's unique about it? Like Craig said, why tell this story now? What's prescient about this story? What else are the things? Who are you working with? The team that you want to work with? What experience have you got?
Do they ask for match funding, Anne-Marie? I can't remember. Do they ask if there's any additional funding attached?
I think, from the conversations I had, they do love it if you have somebody. Yeah. They're not asking you for match funding. They will give you 100% of the funds, but they do love it if you have got seed funding from some, say, for instance, you've got it through an organization, maybe it's a charity that you've worked for, and you're going to make some material for them, and they're going to help publicize it or whatever. You've joined dots in other areas, but you can just apply without anything. But I do think it'd be worth you just logging into their system. They have a post room as well. You have to upload material. So they're asking you for scripts that you've written. They're asking you maybe if you've made short films before, what, you know, you put up different material. So they're going to be looking at all of that if they're interested in your project. But I think the main thing, that's the most important thing, is get the idea really amazing, that people go, oh my goodness, I love that story. You know, it has to have a story. You know, I'm all about story, characters, story, place, situation. What's the problem? What's going on? Why are we telling this story? You know, why is it important to tell that story now? In fact, talking of hotel rooms, one of the most powerful short films, and I cannot remember the name, I'm so sorry. I think it was an Iranian film. It was two people in a hotel room making love, naked. That was it. And then they get up, and it's a really tender, beautiful scene between them. And it's a really bleak little hotel room with a, you know, one very shabby looking radiator and a very stark environment. Nothing aesthetic about it at all, except this beautiful couple who are, you know, of color. And then they get dressed, and he gets dressed in Hasidim, you know, as a Jewish person, Orthodox Jew, and she gets dressed as a Muslim woman, and they exit the room.
Interesting.
And that was a very short film. It was under 5 minutes. It was so impactful because all you saw was two people who were naked having a lovely time together. And then you realize that when they put their clothes on, that told a story in itself, and that they were obviously, my reading of it was, they were obviously doing this in secret, and then they had to face the real world. It was such a brilliant short film. So I think whatever your underlying, why are you telling that story, that film will always stay with me, because it's relevant, as relevant 10 years ago or 50 years ago as it is today. So there you go. There's a story that lives on. And that's what you want with your audience. You want them to come away going, oh my God, I've been through an experience. And, you know, that Leo Grand film, I felt like I'd been through an experience. Women of a certain age, dare I say any more?
we're gonna get a question from Claire in a moment. I would just say, if you are making a short with voiceover, one thing the pandemic has done is a lot of actors have the ability to record in their own houses now. There's so many mini recording studios everywhere. I think that is that's something that's very accessible now.
Can I just say one thing about voiceovers, though? It's really, really, really important to make sure whoever's doing the voiceover is really good, because you can ruin a fantastic script. And I've used voiceover in film, but make sure they're really, really good, because voices they either sound authentic or they don't. And if you put in someone who has just a voice that just doesn't hang, and I've done this with students, ask them to change the voiceover voice, even if it was the actor's voice, because I just didn't think it worked. And then they got someone else to do it, and it made a massive difference. So whoever you're going to get, even if it's a non-actor, there are lots of non-actors who are brilliant and have beautiful voices. Just make sure it's a good one if you're going to use it.
That's a really good point. Absolutely. Because again, you want your audience to be feeling the authenticity of that and being engaged. If it just doesn't match with what's on screen, it can really just throw it, can't it? So yeah, I think that's a really good point.
One more question, Steve, and I'll be really quick. Is that okay? Anne-Marie,
yeah, sure.
When you make your films, is it so that people see this material because it's really important and that's why you put them in the festival? Or do you put them there so that you want to build towards a feature film, or it's just part of what you do, whether you're writing an article for a magazine, whether it's a short film, whether it's a theatre piece? Why do you put your films into the festivals?
I mean, I did it for, I suppose it's recognition, isn't it? Especially when you've made it, the one that I did enter into film festivals. It was a kind of strategy on my part to go, okay, it's managed to get into international film festivals.
Right.
And, you know, my thing is more directing and writing. It's not just the writing side for me.
Yeah.
I love to be able to write something that I'm going to make. So I suppose it's building up my directorial canon, I suppose, because, you know, if you get known to be a writer, and then you just want to show what else you can do. And it also shows a lot of initiative. And I do think people take that seriously. And I remember talking to Alice Cabanis about that. And she was saying, there's nothing wrong with people making their own stuff. In fact, it shows quite a lot that you've done that, you know, because there's a lot of effort that goes into making stuff. But I would say there's no point in making stuff that is half-cocked in a way, and try and make the production values as good as you possibly can. If that's not something that you can do yourself, team up with people who maybe you've seen some of their work. And again, I think most people will do stuff if it's not a huge amount of commitment of time on their part. Certainly for the crew, they're only on it for 2 or 3 days. You as the writer, director, producer, whatever you're doing, you're on it for couple of years sometimes. You know, sometimes you're lucky, it's done and dusted within a couple of months, but we all know how long it takes to write a script. If it's any good, you've got to do 10 drafts of it to make it really, really good. So yeah, so I would think make sure you've got something that looks really nice as well, and not just a throwaway thing. That I'm sure Craig would say that as well. If you're going to be screening stuff in a film festival, it has to be of a certain quality that's screenable, and the sound has to be good enough.
Absolutely, because festivals, you know, ultimately you want to screen the best short films that you get, because you've also got to think about the festival reputation, ultimately, as well as kind of supporting filmmakers. So you want to screen the best films that you are getting through, and it's a tough task when you get so many films submitted to you. Like, you know, if you're getting 1,300 submissions, you've got to go through them. You want to get the very best of the best so that your audience can enjoy it, and also that you've got a lot of different themes and diversity for people to enjoy as an audience. But it is great to submit to festivals, because then you've got the opportunity to showcase your work, build an audience, put it on your CV, hopefully get some new networks, some additional funding if you're looking for things moving forward. So it's all good.
The other thing I would say about, again, for the BFI, if you applied as a writer, you can, or a writer director, you can another time apply as a producer. You cannot apply for, if you got funding as a director, you don't get funding as a director a second time. So, but you, as producers, they're always crying out for producers in general across the board in this business, because the producer role is the really hard graft, logistical, creative logistical role that you see it from the very beginning right through to the very end. Most people are attracted to doing the writing, directing side, but it takes, you know, it takes a special type of breed of person to do the producing side, where you're supporting someone else's talent as well as your own. So I would say that's another route. And there's no reason, there's a lot of this now, that writers are becoming showrunners on huge shows, because they're almost like the creative producer as well as the writer. So you're like the lead writer. So if you've got producing skills, that's a really useful thing. So there's quite a few writer producers, and you're allowed to apply as a writer producer. You cannot apply as a director producer. And that's because both of those roles are so involved at the same period of time that actually you couldn't do both roles at the same time, even though I have done it, but not with a budget. You know, it's too stressful to do those roles at the same time, especially if you're dealing with a proper budget as well, and actors of caliber and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that's another tip.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited by this session. Thank you.
Great. Craig, I should ask you, what next for Norfolk Screen? What plans do you have? Or with
Norfolk Screen, because we don't, the Norfolk Screen stuff don't deal with short film submissions. That's the Norwich Film Festival. But with Norfolk Screen, we are just continuing to build up our website, our database of talent and crew and facilities and locations in the region, and spending lots of time harassing producers to think about Norfolk as a place to film. because it's a wonderful place, and we need more filming in the region.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you both for sharing all this wisdom and experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Zooming in.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyable.